Ontario, Maggie Braun.
Laura is a big reason why I'm out here in Calgary and in Alberta and just helping to inspire this trip and all the volunteers that helped put this together. There's been people watching what we're doing in Ontario and across the country, and on that inspiration, doing the same thing here in Calgary. And it's echoing out all across Alberta. And we've had a great week here. I can't believe it's just been a week. Can everyone hear me okay? Is it close enough? Okay. We've spoken at about 3 events of this size or a little larger, and one small town in Castor, Alberta, and the room was packed, and this message is really resonating. I'm so glad that you brought up the convoy and the fact that that did give this country hope. It also brought us out of the woodwork. The people who knew that something was wrong, we kind of started getting together in our communities, and then when the convoy came and there was a place to actually go and meet like-minded people, our communities started to connect. And then we started to connect those communities across our province. And then the national groups started forming. And people like myself who've been aware of different ways that our country is being impacted by the global agenda started to have an opportunity to share that information with people and really spread it out across the country. I was in Ottawa for the convoy for at least 8 days and stayed right until the end. And honestly, I don't think initiatives like KickLei would be able to, would have happened had they not instituted the Emergency Act and told everyone to go home. Right? They didn't. We went there looking for leadership, looking for the government to show us a sign that it had the ability to listen to Canadians, and it proved it wasn't interested. And then they drove us all home, and now, since that time, we're regrouping in our hometowns, and that's when KickLei started. I was outside at a Saturday rally across from our town hall, and I said to the group, I think we need to start going in there Tuesday nights at 6:30. Because I had already been watching their agenda and looking at their environmental committee reports, and you just got to know what to look for. Environmental committee is a good place to keep an eye on them, because they're the ones driving the net zero. And in that first report that I pulled up, it said that they were working with unnamed partners. They wouldn't even say KickLei in the report. They hide this from their councils, that they're signed up and connected with these organizations, because then the council would say, who is KickLei? And start looking into it, maybe, right? They said that they were aiming for net zero by 2050, and that they were looking for ways to target our mobility. What a way to say that, right? What does that mean? And then they said how the COVID lockdowns were beneficial because we weren't driving around as much, right? So this is all part of their program. You can just imagine the kinds of policies that they're getting local councils to adopt in order to prevent us from moving around this great country that we have and going and visiting our local communities next door and so on. So there's a pattern there. And it was when I dug into who is this unknown partner that I found KickLei. And I had, up until that point, put a lot of the pieces together, but that was the key, is this organization, KickLei. And when I looked into the history, KickLei was founded by the United Nations in 1990. It's the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. They have chapters all across the world. But what did they do? As soon as they were founded in 1990, they came over to Canada and they sat down with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. That's who they wanted to talk to. How interesting, right? And the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, up until that point, had been a network in place where people who are elected into local government, they can get together with other councillors from across the country and discuss the needs of their community and the kinds of programs and funding opportunities that they'd like to see from the federal government and so on. And in 1990, everything changed. Instead of being a voice for local government to the federal government, it became a voice for international organizations to local governments. And all their programs flipped. And when we look at the FCM, what programs are offered, we can see that they're covering all the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them, right? So the FCM worked with KickLei to draft what became known as Agenda 21. The documents that were signed in Rio de Janeiro were drafted in part by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And then, as soon as that was signed, the FCM and KickLei partnered together to create programs that could implement Agenda 21. They sent all their member municipalities a 40-page document called the Municipal Primer, promoting sustainable development through local strategic action, and they laid out a blueprint on how they would implement Agenda 21 through Canadian municipalities. Agenda 21 is an agenda that, for the most part, I would say almost all of Agenda 21 is implemented at the local level. Yes, the provinces have something to do with it, but we're going to get into that. And the federal government has something to do with it. But the place to stop it is locally. And they didn't want us to know that, which is why they keep KickLei hidden and they don't answer questions about it. They want us to be distracted, looking at these wars and what the king said over Christmas and his empty words that sound like this agenda is moving forward and there's nothing we can do it. Well, if the monarch said this, then there's nothing we can do. It's too big for all of us little people, right? And if now that we know that it's being adopted locally and implemented, we can do something about it. Because look at this room. 100 people are interested in this in and around Calgary. And it only takes a small group of people watching that agenda, researching, putting together info packages for the community and the council, and then mobilizing that 100 people to sign petitions, to spread awareness, to show up on presentation day at the councils, and we can make a big difference when we organize locally like that. And we've proven that. We've had, every time we have gone into a council and provided information on these issues, and we made clear recommendations, and we provided reports, we have had results with it every single time. In Peterborough County, that was the second deputation that we did. We went in, 10-minute presentation about the official plan and how it was redirecting population growth away from the rural areas, all the little townships in our county, and driving the population into the main city and the urban areas. And that by passing that official plan with no opposition, that council we were speaking to that day was just about to sign the death sentence for their township. And we made our point clear, and we had 68 people show up to this tiny council that had never seen more than 3 people take an interest in their meeting the entire time that they were in those chambers, right? It changed the entire vibe of that room, and we the people then owned that chambers that day. and they delayed that official plan, and it's still delayed. Then we went to Thorold. We honed in on the Partners for Climate Protection program. This program was the next big key. So we found KickLei, we found the municipal primer, we discovered that the FCM was responsible for drafting Agenda 21, and that they partnered with KickLei. And then we found out that in 1994, the same year that they sent the municipal primer, they launched a program called the Partners for Climate Protection Program. This is a program that is designed to help municipalities with climate action plans. It all sounds good if you've been raised in our school system and you haven't questioned anything. It sounds like that might be a good thing. But nobody really looks into what this climate action plan is. What are we doing here with it? So the 5 milestones of this climate action plan, there's 5 of them. The first one is to do a massive data collection, and where they gather all the data on our energy consumption and waste patterns from all sectors and all sources, so residential, industrial, our cars, our cattle, our septic system, how much waste is coming out of the septics in the counties and stuff like that. Passing ridiculous bylaws that are forcing rural landowners to have their septics pumped and inspected every year. And I think for no other reason other than to gather this data. But they're putting the cost of that onto the homeowners without telling them what the real reason is. So a massive data collection project. And data is the new gold, right? So they say, sign up for our program, participation is free. And the first thing they get the council's staff to do is spend thousands of hours running around and gathering as much of this data as they possibly can, all that work, just to give that information to KickLei. Who is KickLei, right? So they're giving our data away for free to an international third party that is partly funded by Google, who is owned by BlackRock and Vanguard and all the big multinational corporations that fall under them. They give that data away. They put it into KickLei's software, which helps them set, milestone 2, set reduction targets. So most cities are aiming for about 40 to 50% reductions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And most of that is coming from our cars. They don't want us driving our cars, and you can probably see this in every city. The focus on active transportation, bike lanes, trying to get everyone biking everywhere. Do you want to bike everywhere to run your errands? Does that seem convenient for you? I know I like biking, but it's not something I would go do my grocery shopping with or take my kids to school using, right? This is not something that is practical here in Canada. So they get them to set the reduction targets, and when they do that, they're locking in council to long-term objectives. They're binding the hands of future councils, right? If you get elected and the previous council before you has set these reduction targets and adopted these plans, then it's a harder thing to say we don't want to do this, especially if there's nobody in the community telling them that they don't want them to do it. That's a big part here. We, the community, do need to tell our councillors that we don't want them to proceed with these programs. Because there's going to be a few councillors who would really like to get out of this stuff, but until we show up, they're not going to have that same power behind their voice. They need to show that there's community support for all of that. So they set the reduction targets and then they develop an action plan. So I believe that the data goes into KickLei software, reduction targets are set, and it comes back with all these recommendations. And all the recommendations are pretty much the same across the board. So I'll just name some of those here. So we know what to look for when we're looking at the agenda or what's coming out in the newspaper and what our local community is doing. We see that they are looking to upgrade the municipal fleet. They're looking to retrofit and upgrade municipal buildings. They're looking to install EV charging stations and smart city technology to assist with all the data collection. They're looking into the 15-minute city models. And I'll tell you my thoughts on that in a second. The active transportation networks, which cost a lot of money and usually take out parking in and around areas that have small mom and pop businesses. I believe that this 15-minute city and active transportation model is a way to target small businesses. It's not just about locking us into a zone. It's about negatively impacting small business owners so that they can get replaced with all the corporate chain stores.
Yep.
That's what they're doing, because when we read the official plans and they're talking about 15-minute cities or calling them complete communities or whatever it is, the name of the day, it's always tied into this is a way that global investors will invest in our community, right? So they and I've just noticed that pattern, that the small towns, they're going in, they're putting the bike lanes right in front of all the small businesses. Nobody can park there anymore. They kind of get starved out. And then as the bigger chains come in, they'll just replace the pharmacy and the bakery and the cafe with, thank you, with the same chain stores. And we don't want to see that here in Canada. We want our communities to have strong small businesses. And I noticed here in Alberta, traveling, that some of your small towns, you can tell that this model is not being implemented there. The smaller, there's ones where you can see it is, and other ones you can see that is all mom and pop stores still, which is pretty cool. And I'm happy to see that in Alberta. And it doesn't surprise me because you're very community minded here. Whereas in other provinces, they've done a better job breaking the communities apart, right? So, I'm just gonna have a second. They're also highly focused on urban densification. That is really what is driving sustainable development in general. So sustainable development, a little bit about the history there is, they came out with the idea of sustainable development, but they sold it to us as saving the land for future generations. And everyone thought that's a good idea. But we didn't know that we were signing up for a development scheme that was designed to drive populations away from the small towns and rural areas and into the urban centers and into high density housing. That's why they want urban densification in the cities. It's not necessarily for all the people moving here from other countries, although they're making room there as well. It's because they are squeezing people out of the small towns and rural areas and wanting them to drive to be, well, it's displacing them and it's driving them into the cities as well. So you can see why I would look at this, and I think other people too, when we start to think about this, how sustainable development is a scheme that really doesn't fit the Canadian mold. We have a lot of land. We have towns spread out throughout this country and farming communities. And we are the second largest country in the entire world. And we need to be dispersed across the country. We can't have everyone living in the 10 cities of Canada. That just doesn't make sense, does it? We're already 89% completely uninhabited. Our country's, we have a lot of wilderness here, and we're going to get into that. So that's that. I'm going to move on a little bit and look at some of the arguments that we're finding are successful in countering this program, these programs. So whenever we see something on a local agenda and a provincial agenda, really, that is in line with pushing Agenda 21, Sustainable Development Goals, we need to know that those are all voluntarily being adopted. None of it is being enforced on us at the local level. They use certain wording to make it seem like local councils need to do this, and they're tricking local councillors into adopting this using fancy words like participation in the program is free, or local governments are essential for the successful implementation of the Paris Agreement. Those are in the joining resolution to some of these programs, right? So when the local council sees that, they think, oh, well, Canada did sign up for the Paris Agreement. Maybe we have to do this, right? And so what we're pointing out to them, and I've done a report for Alberta and working through the other provinces, but that the Paris Agreement is a non-binding international treaty that commits the federal government, not municipalities, to greenhouse gas reduction targets. That's it. The federal government's operations are impacted here. So when we're looking at each government, there's federal, provincial, and municipal. And when they talk about the federal government or the provincial government or a municipal government setting reduction targets, that is supposed to, that only incorporates their operations, not us, okay? I hope that makes sense. That when the provincial government sets net zero targets, that's just for their staff and their buildings and their employees, not all of us. So, same with the Paris Agreement. The federal government has set net zero legislation. It does not impose any mandates on the municipal governments. And here in Alberta, you have a couple acts and regulations about emissions, but all of those are related to large industrial emitters, and again, you have nothing to do with municipal net zero participation. Is not mandated. So they've made all of this voluntary at the local level, which is great in some ways, because it means that we can lobby and influence our local councils to withdraw from the programs. Up until now, there has been no pushback across Canada to draw attention to what these programs really are and the negative impact on our communities. And it seems that just a little bit of resistance from the people is yielding results in the councils. Like, the councils are just waiting for the people to show up and start to say something, to say anything, to withdraw, because there's one councillor on these small councils and big councils, maybe not all of them, but the majority of Canadian councillors have a couple councillors on there that all they need is just a little bit of community support, and they're just going to run with it. And we saw that in Thorold. When they saw what we were doing in Peterborough, two councillors from Thorold in Niagara of Ontario reached out, and they said, can you help us here? They just needed a little bit of help, right? And we got together, we found 4 people that were interested in working on this, gave ourselves a couple months to do this. We did presentations to their environmental committee. We talked about the concerns that we had with the Partners for Climate Protection program. And we did presentations to their council as well. We did a petition and gathered support from the community. We filled the room every time one of us was speaking or this was on the agenda. We show that there was an interest in the community. And that's a big deal, because they like to get reelected. They would like to get reelected, some of these councillors. And when, you know, again, they're in the council chamber a few times every month, and nobody's been showing up their entire term, and all of a sudden, the room is packed every time this one issue gets raised. It lets them know that this is something that people are showing up about. It matters to the people. And they, I think, have an opportunity to be heroes at this time, right? I think we all have a hero inside of us, and these men and women who are on our councils, they have stepped up to be leaders in the community, and a lot of them have an opportunity to make history here and turn Canada around. In Duro Dummer, when we stopped the official plan there, the councillors were so sweet. You know, it's a farming community, and the councillors they really do care about the community there, and they just didn't have this information provided until this time. And once we provided the information, one of the older councillors, he said, I think we need to listen to what Maggie Braun said. Those are facts that she stated, and if we don't do something, we're going to lose this township. And he said, I think it's time that we stand and be counted. And it shows the power that a local council has. They have the power to decide what that municipality does, what programs and policies they participate in and adopt. They have a lot more power than they even realize. And I remind them that I look at the elected council, not at the CAO, not at the clerk and the planners, and I remind them, I tell them, look, those of you who are elected, you are the government. The city staff is not the government. You have the power to decide what to do here. Because what we're constantly finding is that the CAO and the clerk are trying to steer them in a certain direction and provide information to make it seem like the best thing to do is to adopt the program and carry on and so on. So we need to remind them it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to disagree with what the clerk and CAO are proposing, and to side with what the people are saying that they want, to look for an alternative to all of this. So they did a really great job, and they proved to this country that local councillors have the power to do a lot more than they think they do. So in my provincial reports, I look into each province's municipal act to look into what the duty of the council is. What are they responsible for? And I include this in my report to remind them that they have a duty to consider the welfare and interests of the municipality as a whole and bring to council's attention anything that would promote the welfare or interests of the municipality. And I remind them that this responsibility extends beyond infrastructure and operations to include the well-being of the residents, businesses, and property owners. That should be, I tie it back in case there's any confusion. I'm pretty sure that considering the welfare and interests of the municipality, we're going to assume that means our interests, right? And then if there's a question there, we're going to have that conversation and get some open dialogue about what's going on here. Because we are assuming when we elect elect someone that their job is to represent us, right? So we're going to start that conversation and tie it back in. So we remind them of their declaration of office, their duty, and their oath. We remind them that the Paris Agreement, federal legislation, and provincial climate policies are not mandating anything at the municipal level. That they are adopting this voluntarily. That means that they can leave or stay, and that the FCM and KickLei and the Government of Canada have completely waived or disclaimed any liability for the implementation of the programs that we're offering. So that means that all the potential financial and legal risks associated with participating fall on the council, and the community can suffer for that. So we're reminding that, you know, the pros and the cons of voluntary participation. The only pro is that they can leave, in my opinion, that they can leave if they want to. Then we remind them of the cost. They say that the program is free to participate, but each of those milestones, and in order to implement this with all of the potential capital expenditures, does cost money. And I put together a report on that just to show them, you know, at a bare minimum, how much would it cost to do this in a community, an average sized community. And it's in the millions. It's between $7 million and $192 million for an average Canadian municipality. And that is the most conservative estimate. I am quite sure that they drive that up into the billions. Here in Calgary, you guys are $80 billion? $87 billion is being spent on your climate action plan, right? So when I did my little report, it was just to show them, stop saying it's free. It's not free, right? And I put that report out in the fall, which is a really important time for municipalities to get in there and start talking to them, because that's the budget season, right? It's one thing to go in there and talk about, you know, hey, did you know that you signed up for a program that's driving Agenda 21 and the UN Global Agenda? And they're going to start shutting their ears off, right? But if we go in there at budget season and we say, hey, did you know that you signed up for a program that said it was free to participate, but it actually has a lot of hidden costs, and you haven't done any cost analysis of that, maybe you should, right? And we put that report in front of some councillors in Ontario and Simcoe County. We beta tested our strategy there, and it worked. The report went in, the presenters went forward, they presented the information on the cost of the program and recommended that the council get the staff to do a full cost analysis. And we gave them all what to look for, right? And they did. They, right away, the next meeting, they moved the motion to do a full cost analysis of what it actually costs to run this program in their little tiny township. It's actually called Tiny Township. And I grew up in Tiny Township, which is important. We want to advocate for our hometowns, right? So you might live in the city here, but maybe you came from a small town at some point, or your family's rooted in a small town, and you still have connections there. I would double check and see what that small town's involvement is, because if they're not a member of the Partners for Climate Protection Program, because you only have 25 here in Alberta directly signed up for that, and we have the list there for you to look at, but you have 230 of your municipalities are signed up for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and we'll get into that. But yes, and I'm going to show you what we can do here in Alberta and across the country to get all those municipalities, especially the small town and rural ones, to withdraw, really simply. I put together basically a half-an-hour action package for everyone to send this to the councils here in Alberta, and it's going to go across the country. And again, I think a lot of the local councils here know that the FCM isn't providing programs that actually meet their needs, especially in rural areas, and they're considering withdrawing. And how much more of a boost would it, right now it's just an idea in their mind, right? It's a couple councillors maybe thinking, you know, that FCM is not doing anything for us. If anything, it's pushing programs that are negatively impacting our communities. And then all of a sudden they get a letter in their email and it just lays it out for them. You know, The County of Stettler, and this is true, they just did this. The County of Stettler, and this is what gave me the idea. I was in Castor, small town. They're not doing the PCP program, but they're signed up for the FCM. And this comes across my desk. It's a letter from the County of Stettler. They sent it to the FCM December 16th, 2024. Has anyone seen this yet? No. Okay, this is really great. It's to the FCM for the non-renewal of membership for 2025. Yep. And we're in an information war. Right? Everyone recognizes that. We're in an information war, and our words are our weapons. Right? And so this is an absolute cannonball to the FCM. They laid it out. I'll just read a little bit here. The County of Stettler wishes to formally notify the Federation of Canadian Municipalities of our decision not to renew our membership for the 2025 fiscal year. This decision has been made following careful consideration and echoes concerns raised by other rural member municipalities. We believe the FCM has increasingly moved away from adequately representing the unique challenges and priorities of rural municipalities. While we recognize the importance and possibilities of the national body advocating for all municipalities across Canada, we feel the needs and voices of rural communities like ours are being overshadowed by those of larger urban centers. The FCM's mandates and activities appear to prioritize urban issues, leaving rural concerns marginalized and our voice effectively silenced. And then they have a couple more paragraphs there. But they did such a great job, right? They didn't even have to state their reason for leaving, but they did, and they left a little clue for all the rural municipalities across Canada who are signed up and who are thinking the same thing. Should we be a member of this organization? Because it's not providing anything for the rural municipalities of Canada. And then they CC all the rural municipality associations from every province. So they want this to get out there. So that is so exciting, and I want to make it easy. I want, when something like this happens, we got to get that message out, right? This is breaking news that can save our country, and as much as we need to go in and speak in our cities, because that is, when we think of the energy in our words, when we speak at the podium at the city level, and we share this information, that broadcasts further. And then it lands with councillors and people all across the province or the country. And then when we go into the rural and the small town council with the same message, they've heard it twice now, and their communities showing up, and it just pushes them out. I hope that makes sense. But so yes, we have to keep pushing in the cities, but recognize that it's going to be rural Canada that will withdraw first, and they will unite together, and then the cities will have to get in line, right? So the response in Castor was just amazing. So with this, obviously the work that I'm doing, I've been focusing on the Partners for Climate Protection program because I really see it as a main program that we have a lot of concerns about. We've articulated those concerns. We've proven in Thorold that we could get that council to withdraw from the program, so we know we can do this. We've proven in Tiny we can get them to question the cost of the program. We just did a presentation in Renfrew County where I showed them the population of Ontario, how much Ontario is emitting in CO2, and then looking at the landscape, the forests, the wetlands, all the different carbon sinks, and showing them that Ontario already absorbs 4 to 8 times more CO2 than it puts out, right? And then tying it back to that duty of council, they need to decide if this program is worth doing. You know, again, Renfrew County is a rural municipality, and they are contributing through 60% of their land being crown land and the rest being agricultural, that they are already contributing to that net negative CO2 balance for the province. And signing up for a program like this that would then redirect funds away from actual municipal responsibilities would not be in the best interest for the community. So that's why we bring that in. We tell them what their duty is. We show them that they don't have to do it from the legal side, but also from the environmental side. Put those numbers in front of them, and then we request that they work alongside us, that we will be there for them to support them in this. In Renfrew County, we just had that deputation on Tuesday last week, and right away the councillor asked, and I wasn't expecting this, he asked if I would do a report just for their county, so not for Ontario, but to just look at their county and their population and their natural assets and determine how much more CO2 they absorb there than they emit. And they offered the assistance of their GIS department to get me the numbers of hectares for each ecosystem that absorbs CO2. And this is another example of how we can work with the councillors to give them the information they need to then say, because they're already looking for a reason to not do this, right? So this is going to help them have a very regionalized report and back up what they want to do and withdraw. There's only one councillor in Renfrew County really pushing this, and there always is just one, at least one. When they sign up for the Climate Action Plan programs, they do it in a joining resolution, and once they've adopted the program, they get one councillor and one staff member to be in charge of the file. And so what's happening there is, and then they send that joining resolution to the FCM, and then KickLei has direct access to start downloading information to that clerk and council member, and that council member then starts moving things onto the agenda through motions, right? So it comes down from KickLei and onto the agenda from the one councillor at the very least, and then they usually have a couple other councillors that are seconding that motion and moving it forward. It's a bit different in everyone. But if you're in the council meeting when this stuff is happening, you can identify which councillors are pushing the program, which ones are kind of sitting back like, oh, not this again, okay. We can't say anything about it because we're going to be bullied in the media, and nobody in the community is pushing back in a reasonable way, so we can't side with them. You know, even if we go in there and we're trying to make our point, if we do it in the wrong way, it won't work, because the councillors, we need to be so professional that the councillors will be happy to say, to repeat what it is that we're saying. And that's why I try and keep our arguments simple, because despite the fact that there are so many issues that we could address and so much information we could bring forward, sometimes it's better just to dumb it down and keep it simple so that everyone can get behind what we're saying, and we don't have to convince people of all sorts of different things, right, that we might not even be sure about and are just researching ourselves, right? So I like to keep everything simple, and that seems to be working. And then reminding our councillors about what municipal responsibilities are. So there's the federal government, provincial government, and municipal government each have a set of responsibilities that are under their jurisdiction to oversee. And municipal governments are responsible for for economic development, for community safety, community programs, for roads, for infrastructure, for wastewater, for water, that kind of stuff. That's what they're, and zoning and approving, you know, new buildings and stuff like that, right? That's what their job is. And global sustainable development goals are not under the municipal mandate. And what they've done is they've inserted global sustainable development goals underneath the municipal mandate of environmental stewardship. Traditional, local environmental stewardship, tree planting, community cleanup days. Obviously, the waste management falls into that too. Having hazardous waste drop-off sites, places where we can bring our batteries, basic stuff like that, right? That's what would fall under the local environmental stewardship, but they've inserted now the global sustainable development goals under the local environmental stewardship and started sucking time and funds from all the other municipal priorities and redirecting it into EV charging stations, upgrading the municipal fleet. Coming up with new green building standards to tie up the construction industry with more green tape for them to get through. The list goes on of the different things that they're doing. But it's making everyone's job harder. Even the staff in our municipalities, when they actually get this information, they're like, why are we doing this, right? And staff can make recommendations to local councils. And in Thorold, after we provided that information on the program, it was the staff in Thorold who recommended to the council that they withdraw from the program. And when it came down to the vote, it was 7-1 vote in favor to withdraw from the program. That one councillor, you know, couldn't go against his personal mandate to drive this program, and the rest of them voted in favor with the people. So it worked. I'm gonna have another sip, sorry. Coming down with a sore throat. We will push through. Yes, we want to redirect them back to what their municipal priorities are and show them that this is not a municipal priority. And that goes back again to their declaration of office, or oath of office, and what their duty is. Their duty is first and foremost to take care of those municipal priorities. And then if they have time and money left over, they can maybe get themselves some new fancy electric Zamboni or something like that. Then they can buy a toy. But they don't get to go out and buy toys and knock down perfectly functional municipal buildings and just so they can say that they built a new green building for their municipality so that they can be net zero by 2050 while raising our taxes. They don't get to do that. It doesn't make any sense. And the way we can put a stop to this across Canada is we need to start providing our councillors with data from their community that shows that their community does not want them to prioritize global sustainable development goals over their priorities. So we've designed a survey on KickLei, and if you have your pamphlet, you can go, it'll take you to the website there, and you want to do that survey, and it's a very basic survey, and we're basically asking, what would you like your local council to prioritize? We list the municipal responsibilities and things under their jurisdiction, and then we include at the end global sustainable development goals, net zero by 2050 targets, and so on. And what we're going to find there is the data that we're going to get back to be able to give to our councils is going to show them that their community does not want them to prioritize the global goals. Don't you think that that's the result we're going to get? Whether it's this room doing the survey or we just get that survey out to the community, everyone across Canada knows that we're suffering at the local level. Nationwide crises in affordability and availability of housing and the prices are just going up. We have mental health issues, I think stem a lot from displacement. over the last 30 years, people being displaced from their communities, being driven into the cities in this new culture where, you know, there's drug addiction comes in, and then now we have tent cities all across this country. How did that happen? Right? Where did these people come from? How did it, you know, there are those issues, and so that survey is going to be amazing, and my goal is this summer to get that survey done by as many people as possible across the country so that we can do up a report, an analysis on that survey, and we can use that when we go in and speak to our councils to show them that the community doesn't want them to prioritize those goals. And what that's going to do is, whenever we have an official plan or a strategic plan that is focused on net zero or global sustainability goals, like we saw in Brandon and in Winnipeg and in Edmonton and in Calgary, your official plans are geared for net zero by 2050. That seems to be the entire purpose of those plans. And the survey will help us greatly because we can then bring that in and show them. Instead of just doing a presentation to the council, we can actually bring them in hard data and ask them why the official plan, the long-term plan for the community, is based off of something that isn't even a municipal priority. And right now the community is saying that they should prioritize economic development or one of the other municipal priorities that they're actually supposed to be addressing. I hope that makes sense. That we need to just show them the common sense argument and put it in front of them, and then just tell them they have to scrap these official plans that are aimed for net zero. It's not what the community wants or needs, and it's not in their mandate. So these are all tools that we can use. And how I kind of came up with this is just watching the local council and seeing how the other side was doing it. So the other side is getting them to adopt all of these programs and plans, and they're doing it through reports with recommendations. And then they're going in and doing presentations to council, and they're going around town with the David Suzuki Foundation and gathering signatures on a petition saying that the community wants the climate action plan. And then they put that all together and they do a survey that isn't as good as mine, because I actually give people options to pick if they want this or not, whereas their survey is essentially pick your top 3 sustainable development action items you want done first, and then they bring that to the council and it says, oh, your community wants the active transportation, they want more bike lanes, they want such and such, right? But they didn't provide any other options. They didn't provide any actual municipal priorities on there. So that's how they're doing it. And this is kind of like a battleground, right? It's chessboard. They're making those moves, right? And if we want to actually counter them, that means we need to learn how to make those moves too, right? So the reports that I'm doing are kind of setting an example of that, and I want more and more people to feel empowered to just start trying to create these kinds of reports too. See how they're done. And there's editing software out there that can help you to take your concerns about an agenda item or a news article or anything happening in your council and get it into the different format that it needs to be, and get all your information together, turn that into a report with your references, and then that can be the basis of an entire campaign. So from those are the points that you make in your presentation to council. Those are the main points that you put in your petition that you're going to take around town. And you can also get from that report a resolution to put in front of the council. So we want to make their job a lot easier, and we can do that by, if we're asking them to do something, take it the next step and make them a resolution so that they can pass it quicker. And they don't have to think about the way that they would word that. So we're learning these civic engagement tools that we kind of need to put all together in order to win. So I wish I had a projector here, but what is that? I'm really excited about that FCM withdrawal letter. So what time do we have here? So what I did with that is I put together that package now. So here in Alberta, you can look, and oh, I wish everyone could see this. Hold on.
Is it on the website anywhere? Can we see it in our own phones?
Hold on. I just want you to see on the Gather 2030 Substack. That's where it is, but I'll put it on the main page for KickLei Canada. This will be a big campaign that we can push back on the FCM because it'll get more people involved because the FCM has 2,000 members signed up. The PCP program has 522. So this is something that a lot of people in smaller towns and stuff want to do something, but they're not signed up for the Partners for Climate Protection program, so this is something they can do too. And it's a perfect example of how easy this can be for us. So basically I say here, the County of Stettler did this, check it out. There are currently 2,000 member municipalities signed up for FCM. Here's their directory, check and see if your community is on it. Then everyone can go and look and see, okay, yeah. Castor, the town of Castor is on here, cool. That means that we can move forward with this. And then I attach a report that I did on the FCM, and it's a very basic report, but I'm really just backing up what they said here, that it's not to the benefit of the smaller rural municipalities, and I add urban to it as well, because by driving population into the urban areas, they're creating an urban crisis. So it's not helping either, any of them here. And so I do that report, it's only 3 pages long, and what I want everyone to do is to send that to their council locally. And I provided the words that you put into that email when you send it to them. And then essentially that email will say, it will let them know about this, let them know about the report, let them know that you would like to potentially meet with them and discuss if they have any questions about this, because we do want to meet our counselors more in person and start just to form a relationship with them as much as we can and find the good ones, right? And to work together with them. And then it lets them know if they have any further questions, they can reach out to me at KickLei.ca as well, right? So it takes the pressure off you guys to, you're going to send the email to them. Your job is to then carry it forward and meet with them and share the concerns. And if they have bigger questions, forward it to me. And so we get that email to them with the report, and I include another attachment, which is your a template that they can use to withdraw from the FCM. Again, we're going to do the work for them. We're going to write that letter for them, right? So all they have to do is like, well, that's good. I actually really want to do that. I'm going to bring this to the council meeting and see if we can do this too. Let's go for it, guys. They save money by withdrawing, and I think we're going to see a mass exodus of the rural small towns from the FCM. So we do that. Then I put a little petition together. So after you send the email to the counselors with the attachments, that's already pre-drafted for you. You just have to find your counselors' emails. Then there's a petition, and you go to your local groups. You get as many signatures as you can. And you can then take it a step further and do a presentation to your local councils about this, where I provide a very basic script that you can use, and it will let them know that you support them in withdrawing from the FCM and how many people signed your petition. And I think that that's all we're going to need for the majority of these small towns to to get them to withdraw. Because nobody's ever even talked about the FCM. Like, the people of Canada didn't even know what the FCM was, right? So to now have people from all across the country emailing and doing petitions and going in and doing a very short, polite presentation, letting them know that they have the community support to leave, they're just going to leave. So that's going to be a good one. And then we'll do the same with the Partners for Climate Protection Program, but that's going to be a little harder. We've got to work on it together and get that package for everyone. So I also include there in that advocacy package at the end the code of conduct, the link to the KickLei code of conduct, and just really trying to share with everyone the approach that we've taken that is proving to work, and what we're doing a little bit differently than that's getting results, I'll say. So there's a couple things there, and some principles. And when we're working to influence our local councils, we need to understand that we're not in control, necessarily. At the end of the day, they're the ones to make the decisions. But we can do a lot to influence them and get them to do what it is that we would like them to do. But that idea that we can nudge them into doing it and that they're not going to do it overnight, I think is important, because otherwise we're going to go in and put effort in, and if they don't do it right away, everyone says, well, they didn't ask me questions after, they didn't take it seriously, right? But it might take a couple weeks for that information to really sit. Sometimes you can hear information, but until it's applicable in your life, you almost need to hear that information again. I don't know if that makes sense, but I know I've been presented with information, and then I'll start to notice patterns the next couple weeks where all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's related to this. And I think that that's what it takes in the councils. We present the information to them, and then they're going to start seeing this stuff everywhere. And they're going to know that it's all voluntary and it's not being forced on them to do it, and that they can say no. In fact, it's their duty to represent the public, and they should say no, because they have other things to deal with, and their staff is already overburdened with actual work, and they shouldn't be taking on these extra projects. So planting the seed is important, and then being open for collaboration and trying to keep that line of communication open with your council, letting them know that you're there for them. They don't have assistants. They don't have researchers. They get an agenda that has 800 pages worth of documents to go through and approve at the next week's meeting. We need to be there in a relationship with them that they could feel comfortable sending that to us because they know we're interested in it, and saying, hey, can you skim through this? Is there anything that jumps out at you that you might have concerns with? Because then when it comes on the agenda, they can actually raise those concerns and get the changes made to the land use bylaw or whatever it is, right? But if nobody's there pointing it out and then giving it to the council behind the scenes what the issues are, it's just too much work for them to, and I hate to say that because yes, they took this job, but I think we need to help them a little bit. Otherwise, we're just leaving them with the staff and the CAOs to make their recommendations and push their program. So we can help them out a lot, and they appreciate that. Somebody came to the caster meeting, he was a counselor, and we've had lots of counselors come out to these meetings, and they say this is all true. People aren't showing up to the meetings, that these programs are getting in through simple joining resolutions, and the next thing you know, it's kind of taking over their local agenda, and that we're correct in saying that they need the community support in order to actually speak on our behalf. I guess what kind of inspired this is I've shared on this trip a little bit about my childhood, and I was able to travel to Papua New Guinea when I was quite young, and that's the last island that was discovered in the world. It has thousands of different tribes on the island with different cultures and religions and languages, and they still had chiefs, they still had warriors, they had traditional boundaries for their villages and their hunting grounds, right? And they lived side by side, so there's one tribe here and one tribe over there, and they knew where the line was, right? And if there was a conflict between the two tribes, they had a way of addressing that. They would get the chief and the two chiefs together, and the warriors would stand behind those two chiefs while they negotiated. And they're aiming for no bloodshed, but at the same time they're willing to defend their territory, right? And usually it never ends in bloodshed because they have the chief who's very good at speaking on behalf of the people and articulating what needs to be said so that everyone in his village can be protected. So what we're looking for across Canada is people who feel inspired and can see how these programs are negatively impacting their communities to start stepping up. You don't need to be elected to be a leader in your community. Step up, and if you feel called to say something, there's usually a reason for that. What I noticed is I'm not a public speaker. This is all, every time I come up here, I get a little, you just don't feel qualified for it sometimes.
You're good at it. You are.
But I just recognized that something needs to be said and nobody's saying it. So I'm not going to let another day go by or an opportunity to go by where this kind of stuff is going to go through my local council's agenda without someone saying something about it. And I think that that's what we need across the country is people that will just do your best and go in and say something, and you're going to have background knowledge throughout your life and what you've learned to contribute to that conversation. And then what we're doing is we're taking the truth and common sense, we're showing them the origins of these programs and how they are rooted in the agenda of the United Nations, how it negatively impacts our community, how their rationale for these programs, which is rooted in this false claim that human activity is the main driver behind climate change. That's their rationale for the program, and we can just use basic science to show them that that's not a good enough reason. That's not going to hold up any longer here. You know, we know now that CO2 is only 0.04% of the atmosphere. Humans are responsible for less than 4% of that. The rest comes from all natural sources. It's plant food. There's benefits to having more CO2. There is so much information, and I was so pleased. Is anyone here with Friends of Science? Friends of Science? Yes! Perfect. They've done such a good job putting this information together on key facts about climate change and climate-related topics. And I know when I studied ecosystem management in college, that's when I kind of woke up to all of this and started finding all of this information. And it wasn't until after I realized that we do need to address that scientific argument behind why they're pushing the program, that I started digging into my research again and kind of made something just like this. And it's on the website under climate facts. Just my main arguments to oppose their rationale. But I'm really excited to get to know the Friends of Science organization because they've done such a professional job, and they have people with a stronger scientific background putting that together, and that's what we need. Friends of science, partnering in a sense with KickLei, or at least, working together a little bit there to strengthen our position on that. What am I thinking? Anything else I wanted to share here? I'm wondering if we're doing question and answer at all. Okay? Because that usually brings out a lot.
Maggie, I noticed you use a lot of their own language in your presentation. So you use the opposing language.
Yeah.
And I find that a very powerful. I was just saying that I noticed that she uses the language of the opposing view of what we're talking about as a part of her presentation, so that it enforces what she's doing and what we too can do.
So she's pointing out that in my presentations and reports, I'll use their language sometimes. And it does. They don't know which side I'm coming from. And by the time they get to the end of it and I give the recommendation, they're ready to adopt it. Because I've made the point and I haven't gone outside that window of what is going to trigger them. I don't want them to turn their ears off, right? I want them to get through that presentation and accept the recommendation. That is my only goal, right? And that does work really well. You'll read about this in the Code of Conduct too, about dropping the rhetoric, right? We just completely drop the rhetoric. They don't know which side we're on. We don't need to be on the side. We're on the side of what's right for our community. That's it. And then it's not just the counselors who like that. That is, for one thing, that is the traditional culture of a council, is to be polite to one another, to not say anything in a certain way that's overly aggressive, right? You're not supposed to see that with the counselors. That's why even the letter, the bugger off FCM letter from the County of Stettler, they were so polite. We hope the FCM will take these concerns into account to better serve rural municipalities in the future. As always, we are open to engage and further discuss on the issues and barriers we are experiencing.
How can they argue when they've fallen into your trap?
Maggie, would you speak for just a minute about the connection between graphene and carbon capture?
I haven't fully looked into that one, the graphene and carbon capture yet. But
You talked about it on Tuesday at our educational session, why they're trying to capture carbon to make it into graphene.
okay, I'm going to avoid the graphene part because I need to learn a bit more about that technology. But the carbon capture, so she's asking about the carbon capture programs, and you do have quite a few of those here in Alberta, it seems. So this is the idea that they're going to capture the carbon from the air and then drive it underground or do something else with it, like make graphene. Okay. So their plan, they know that by 2050 that there will always be residual, they'll never actually get it to zero, and then they call those emissions that they can't get us to completely reduce residual emissions. And so in 2050, if we don't do anything about this, the councils in 2050 all across Canada will have the carbon captures on their doorstep, the carbon capture plants, and they'll be spending money on these carbon capture plants to suck them down. So it just doesn't end what the councils will be asked to adopt, right? Same with, we see the wind turbines going up, the solar panel fields going up. Those are all in Alberta connected with KickLei. KickLei is working with the province in Alberta to get the wind and solar farms up, and in return, they are offering those communities community buildings. They say, let us do this in your backyard, and we will build you a fancy green community building. And that's what the councils are faced with, that choice. And up until now, the people haven't said anything about this, right? But now you know to watch for it. And we saw that just outside of the pastor. I see a question in the back.
Maggie?
Yeah.
So, I'm wondering, what entity, what's in it for administration to push this? I mean, what is it behind? Because all of a sudden, it looks like our city council really needs to be there, if they're not actually making a decision. So, what is it that's pushing administration to do this?
I think that she's asking what's pushing the administration to carry out this program. I would say that this is what they're trained in. They're being trained. So when you go to, you take the courses that are required to get into a position where you're in the administrative wing or the planning department or as a clerk or as a CAO, their training is rooted and grounded in sustainable development. They're trained in that language. That is the culture that they've come up with. They haven't been presented with any other development schemes.
So that explains why we had a whole bunch of universities who come up and, because before.
Yes. Yes, here in Calgary, that's right. Most of you were opposed, but then the university students of all people came out to support high-density or blanket rezoning here.
So then would that go back to municipal affairs where they're implementing this into those training sessions for the council?
Yes, and when you look at KickLei and the Partners for Climate Protection Program, it says that they offer training and networking events. So they're just, this is their little network, right? This is what they talk about. And KickLei has people that are, our administration. You're going to have people here in Calgary that are in your administration that are regularly attending the KickLei seminars. They have monthly webinars, and we were looking there when doing Thorold. The planner that recommended the council join the PCP program, her name was Lindsay. I was going through KickLei's website and looking at their webinars, and she was in their meetings. So this is how they're connecting with them, right? And then, of course, they go to school, they get these jobs, they want to get a job, and the best way to do it, KickLei's at the table, at the booth there, right? And come to our events, come and network, we'll get you a job. And I don't know about you, when I scroll Facebook, it constantly pops up. Training for chief sustainability officers and all these different job titles related to this. And for 10 months, you can be a chief sustainability officer for your company and everything. So they are pushing it. And I always ask, who's funding these programs? Like, who's funding you? And of course, I see a hand up there. Go ahead. Let me know if you want the mic.
Oh, that's fine, they'll hear me. I don't know I'm assuming that everybody in this room realizes or should realize that everything you've talked about today is all part of the globalist one world government plan. And our universities are complicit in this. They are teaching these young students to be part of the problem we have. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us as far as I'm concerned. I want to thank you for a superb presentation.
Well, thank you. I'm just so happy that this message is landing, that it makes sense, that it's getting everyone thinking that there is something we can do about this.
What happens if we do nothing?
KickLei has a slogan. What is the cost of doing nothing? And I've heard counselors say this when there's opposition. Well, you know, we have to do something. If we don't do something, it could get really bad, even if they don't have the proof to back it up, right? It's this black mindset and catastrophe mindset. So yes, if we do nothing, right, and that is an option. We can all just decide, that sounded cool, but we're not going to do anything. I don't think that that's what's going to happen here in Canada. Everywhere I go, people are like, I want to do this. How can I do this? Tell me more. And it's going to be a lot of work, but it's a whole bunch of little steps that we can do. And if we do nothing, Chris, what we're going to see is every small town across our country slowly downgraded from town to village to hamlet to ghost town. We're going to see high density housing in the cities, living on top of each other, tent cities in every corner. We're going to see a national security crisis, because in order to protect our country, that means that we need to live and disperse across the country. We can't just all be in the little cities. Of course, they're going to have the high-tech smart cities set up and all just running on data collection, and it's going to get bad. And we have an opportunity to stop this now, and I think that the organizations pushing it, they know it. We have them running scared, and it's fantastic to know that. A few examples of that is just the other week, you probably saw Justin Trudeau, he said in an interview that there's this narrative floating around that Canadians would like to prioritize putting a roof over their head and food on their table over climate change. And I had just put out that survey and started talking about the survey, right? Because we want to show the data that yes, Canadians would like to prioritize a roof over their head and food on the table over climate change. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. We sent an open letter to KickLei, and my KickLei Substack, that goes to every elected representative signed up for the PCP program and every provincial and federal representative in the Senate. So it has a wide reach. That open letter to KickLei went out asking, who are you? Please, let us know what your funding sources are and what your connection is with the United Nations and what you're doing with the data that's collected and what your connection is with the suppliers of the products that are being recommended for purchase across Canada, because that's a big thing. They're taking our data, giving it to KickLei, who's connected with all these suppliers of all these products and new street lights and smart meter companies and everything. And then they're recommending that our councils all across the country buy this stuff. Right? So our data is being used for commercial purposes. Right? It's for profit, for corporate profit. So we sent that letter to KickLei, and within 1 week, KickLei posted on their webpage, you can go to KickLei/misinformation. They posted a misinformation page. They never had one before. This is the first time that they've actually been questioned. And they kind of, they didn't say my name on there, but they alluded to it. It was like, that felt good.
You have a bodyguard.
Do I?
Yeah.
Well, not quite. Can't trust anyone.
Maggie, how do you deal with people, once you go to council, or if you're trying to address council, and they shut you out? How do you go about being heard? Can you give me an example?
So it depends on the approach that was taken. We've seen a lot of examples where good counselors and people trying to present have been bullied, have been misrepresented in the media, and that can be really frustrating to deal with. And it's hard not to react and get upset, but we need to avoid as much as possible getting to a place where we're reacting and not responding. Because I knew from the very beginning when we started doing this that whether intentionally or unintentionally, if we make the wrong moves in local councils, they're going to use the media to hone in on that one thing and then try and shut down public interaction with councils across the country, and we see that happening. And we're all learning, and it's okay that we've gone in and it's always okay to go in and say what you feel you need to say. And I think that there's always a way to get back in a better position with the council so that they won't shut you out. And I think we just need to tone it down, provide information, use emails, call councillors, see if they'll meet you for coffee, try and do those petitions so that when you are going to present, you have more community backing. It's not just you. Sending in the reports, being really professional with them. What I do every time I'm communicating with the councils or sending an email, I put what it is I want to say through an editor, and it helps me edit it. And I like ChatGPT. You can write a bugger off letter to your council, put it into ChatGPT, and say, write this as an email to my council, and it'll come out, and it's the sweetest way you could possibly say it in a way that they're going to read that and be like, oh, okay. They'll actually read it, they'll respond to you, but I find I'm the same way. When people send me emails, it's great if people want to send me information, but it's really nice if they've taken the time to edit it a little bit and like get to the point, right? What is the subject line? What am I trying to read here, right? Subject line, basic things like that. So I think when we start communicating well with them, they'll be open to communicating with us. If they've shut you out,
Should we take a couple more questions and then?
yeah.
For a while, so we can this one here.
What is it?
So what I want to know is, I'm really glad that you're directing towards rural activity, but I live in an urban center, and we need to know what we're going to be doing in an urban center, and how we're going to address our neighbors. It would be lovely to speak about the actual issue of our emissions versus what net zero is really going to do. Because in reading from the nuclear physicist point of view, the cost of trying to achieve this is so astronomical, because of the storage and manufacturing, et cetera. And then on top of that, if I understand from wrong, there's no manufacturing in this other district. So someone can come and speak for young people. That's something that is concerning me and really resonates with me. Second, how are we going to deal with this in Calgary? Fortunately, we have a corrupt council. We have a corrupt
And right now, they just have Bill C-35, which is they can build hotels on part-time and don't have to abide by any environmental issues. So, we need, how are we going to deal with the council that we have that is corrupt and reverts another agenda? Now, when they passed that blanket rezoning, they made it so that we no longer have a voice in public hearings for proposed land use changes. In the meantime, one of our residents, I'm sorry, okay, yes, well, one of our residents, a lawyer tried to contest it, and even though that's being contested and they stopped doing blanket rezoning, there's a person, they passed through in council in certain districts in our city to not have any R1 areas. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking on behalf of Calgary. You summed that up really well. So some things tactics, we want to talk about some tactics that we can use, because it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities to expose the fact that the council is not doing what the people would like. I know in Thorold, for instance, we took clips, we watched the videos, and we were able to take clips of the committee members that were pushing the program and making jokes about breaking some of the procedures and stuff. And we kind of did our own smear campaign on them. So clipping them, catching them, saying this stuff, and then spreading that out across, and then writing little press releases about it or information like that. We want to push back on them. And then when there is a councillor who says something, whether we like him or not, if he says something or does something that is good, we also want to clip that, and we want to push that out as, oh, look at what this one did, right? Ashley did something good, and we want to kind of set the example that we are watching them, and that we're going to catch them when they say this stuff. And if they do something good, we're going to praise them for it, whether we like them or not. We're going to try and let them know that they're being watched. Press releases. Did anyone write open letters to the press, or letters to the editor, or press releases during this whole? We got a few people doing that. Excellent.
I just need to say that we do have the call till right now, so.
Okay. So all of those things, you'll notice that I do a lot of that stuff when it comes to clipping videos, doing press releases, letters to the editor, whenever something comes out in the news. We're working in a council and they write a smear piece on the work that we're doing. I counter it right away with a letter to the editor. And I run it through the editor and make sure that it comes out in a way that will, is unbiased and easy for them to print, so we can make sure that we're countering that as well. So here in Calgary, you also had the FCM trade show last year. And I'm wondering if you have that here every year?
No.
Okay, thank you.
They do it yearly, but not in August, in next year will be Toronto.
Okay.
Where's it going to be next year?
Toronto, probably.
Okay, because every year I do want, I thank the group that came out to that trade show and had some KickLei flyers for the councillors and did interviews and asked questions with the councillors. And maybe that's what led to Stettler opting out. Maybe you spoke to one of the councillors from Stettler and it just planted that seed that, yeah, what are we doing here? And then they go in and they realize that all the programs aren't helping the municipality. And this year for renewal, they withdrew. But we'll have to work with the team here in Calgary. You guys have a specific issue here with your mayor, and I think it comes down to launching public awareness campaigns around this and challenging it that way. So.
Thank you very much.
coming. There is a restaurant next door, and they have great food. If you're interested in going for something to eat, there's a restaurant next door.
And there's also a form at the back to sign